Bishop Archelaus in 277 AD wrote a book against the Manichees called The Acts of the Disputation with Mani the Heretic. He argued against Manichaeanism, and thus also against Augustine, by proving that one day all evil, including death itself, would cease to exist.
Would cease to exist.
15, 25,26. Titus, Bishop of Bostra, also wrote a book around 364 AD entitled Against Manichees, where he said, "The punishments of God are holy, as they are remedial and salutary in their effect upon transgressors. For they are inflicted, not to preserve them in their wickedness, but to make them cease from their sins."
Amen.
This is indeed the place of punishment, but it is not endless.
Not endless.
The anguish of their sufferings compels them to break off from their sins.
To break off from their
Augustine's
sins.
theological opponents all argued against his views on the grounds that he had gotten his theology from the Manichees. Some of these charges are true, others are not. It is clear, however, that the 9 years he spent as a Manichee oriented him to think more deeply in areas that the Church had not thought of before that time. It depends upon one's point of view as to whether Augustine was justified in his various views. From our perspective, we note early that his city of God ends with the final separation of good and evil, light and darkness, and that both are eternally preserved in their respective places. Augustine would certainly not have come to this conclusion on his own. He really did get it from the Manichees. One other very influential theologian was Theodore of Mopsuestia, d. 428. He asked, "Who is so great a fool as to believe that God would resurrect men merely to destroy them forever with torments?" Fragment 4.
That's such a good question, and I'll read it again. He asked, "Who is so great a fool as to believe that God would resurrect men merely to destroy them forever with torments?" What would be the purpose in that? Right? Amen.
4. During the Dark Ages, when the doctrine of eternal torment was orthodox in Europe, its judicial shadow came with it burning people at the stake. It was argued that God was going to throw them into an endless torment of fire anyway, so the Church was only initiating it a few insignificant years early.
Wow.
Besides, such justice served to instill fear into the hearts of people of going against the Church in any way, not only to avoid the stake, but to avoid the burning hell. This tactic was certainly effective. No one can argue that point.
Right.
But if one has opportunity to study the divine justice of Bible law, it soon becomes apparent that such punishment is of heathen origin, rather that of the Bible. In every nation, the popular belief about divine justice has always served as a model for the justice of man.
Yeah.
In the Dark Ages, they thought they were imitating God. In reality, however, they were imitating the heathen who burned their children to Moloch in the valley of Ben Hinnom.
Right.
In chapter 4 we will show biblically that the Greek and Hebrew words for eternal and everlasting are mistranslations brought in through the Latin Vulgate around 400 AD. Then we will deal with the more positive subject of God's great restoration.
Right. So here's a big point that's coming. Eternal and everlasting are mistranslations brought in through the Latin Vulgate, which had to do with Jerome, if I'm not mistaken. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be huge.